Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Caleb Maupin. And guess what? You might have an opportunity if you're in the New York or New Jersey area to hang out with Caleb and I on Sunday. Let's talk. Hello, Caleb Maupin and Garland Nixon here, and Caleb is going to have an event. And we're going to talk about the event also. We're going to talk about some news. We're going to talk about what's going on, what Caleb's covering, various things like that. A lot of stuff going on. We're in a very interesting time. You know, we got the issue with the ICE agents shooting people. We've got President Maduro kidnapped, and you were fortunate because both Caleb and I have spent time in Caracas in Venezuela, so we can talk about that also. So there's a lot going on. Caleb's been covering the United Nations lately. A lot of stuff going on down there. We can find out what he's been covering at the United Nations. So this should be a very interesting show, and we should all learn a lot. Now, Caleb has, where's my darn link? Caleb has an event coming up this weekend. Let's talk about the event. Caleb.
Yeah, well, it'll be on Sunday at the Holiday Inn near the Newark Airport on 160 Frontage Road. It's going to be great. If you come, you can register on site if you'd like to come. It's going to be great. I hope to see you there. I mean, I know you'll be there, Garland. I'll be there, and it's going to be great. There's a guy who's involved in organizing the World Youth Festivals in Russia from India. He's going to be speaking. There are 3 local activists we're going to give awards to, including Christina Khalil, who ran for the U.S. Senate for the Green Party in New Jersey, a pro-Palestine activist who's been involved in the Uhuru case. We're going to honor Lisa Davis of the Black is Back Coalition, a close ally of the Uhuru movement. We're also going to honor Jessica Coco, who's a longtime friend of mine, and she shares a mutual friend of yours. You both knew Paul Robeson Jr.
Yes.
Actually. And Jessica Coco is a longtime anti-imperialist, a longtime friend of mine, Italian-American, has organized delegations to Russia. We're going to be honoring her. There's going to be music, speeches. It's going to be a tremendous event, so don't miss it. And there's going to be a nice food buffet too, so there's always that, right?
Oh man, there's going to be good eats there. You know, that's the only reason I'm coming. No, I'm just all jokes aside. But yeah, you know, I'm going to be there. If anybody knows me, knows I'm a big eater. But yes, I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have a blast, Caleb, and I'm going to be a speaker, so I'm going to have an opportunity to speak. And you know, this is a time where, you know, to be frank, you do have to have some optimism. And I don't know if you've ever heard, what is it? The cure for fear is action. I don't know if you ever heard that before. And right now people are like afraid. People are looking at their individual circumstances and they're saying, man, I don't know how I'm going to make it. Things are going up. Is the dollar going to crash? Is my savings going to disappear? Is everything going to go bad? They're looking at police officers on the street shooting people, you know, you know, I mean, like this thing with the ICE agents freaked a lot of people out. They're looking at, you know, afraid of nuclear war and you know, the whole business going on in the you know, the imperialism rearing its ugly head again. But I think somewhere in there, Caleb, as bad as things are, you can talk about how bad things are and what's going on, and we do that because we're journalists. But you also got to kind of say, you know, there's some things we can do, some things we need to do as best we can. You know, it's like, even if you're up to your butt in alligators, every now and then take a couple shovels to empty the swamp. Just do something instead of just complaining constantly about how bad it is.
Indeed. Well, I really appreciated Chairman O'Malley of the Uhuru movement's remarks after the kidnapping of Maduro, where he said that, you know, obviously we have to oppose this crime, but we got to build. The only way this kind of thing is going to stop is if we build a people's movement, the kind of community organizations that bring people together. We have to build a real anti-imperialist movement, and we can't get too caught up in reacting to everything going on. I will say, in reaction to yesterday's events in Minneapolis, Iran now has to invade the United States because Trump said if one single protester gets shot, he was going to invade Iran. So I guess now Iran, one single protester got shot in Minneapolis. Now Iran has to invade the United States for the protection, right? And
then kidnap Trump, I guess, and take him
yeah,
back and charge him with drug dealing.
Yeah, right. I mean, this whole thing is particularly wild. What do Iran, Nigeria, and Venezuela all have in common?
Black gold, Texas tea.
Indeed. And I maintain this isn't simply a matter of wanting to make money from oil. This is the capitalist system breaking down on an international level. The crisis of inflation, it's related to artificial intelligence and human labor power not being utilized in production in the same way. This is the capitalist system breaking down, and they need to destroy productive forces in order to keep the system going. And so Nigeria is an oil-rich country. So Donald Trump discovered Christians have been persecuted in Nigeria. Christians and Muslims in Nigeria have been fighting each other for the last 100 years, right? There's been civil wars. I mean, it's not that there isn't persecution of Christians in Nigeria. There absolutely is. But it's nothing new. But Trump discovered it and decided to do airstrikes and escalate that conflict because Nigeria is an oil-producing state. When it comes to Venezuela, right? We saw that situation. Venezuela has got the world's largest oil reserves. You take a look at Iran, right? I mean, the people of Iran just want democracy all of a sudden. Give me a break. Give me a break. And, there were huge mobilizations to support the Islamic Republic in Isfahan on Monday. And that got almost no publicity. And Iran is kind of at a turning point because, their country, they had an anti-colonial revolution, but there's been different sides of it. And there are economic problems in the country that do need to be addressed. But it's pretty clear that this was just, the USA called up all its allies and Israel called up all its allies and said, let's make Iran scream. And so now Iran is dealing with it. And, Iran has reportedly, I don't know if they completely turned it off, but they're saying there's internet outages in Iran. I remember that when they passed that in the United States, the kill switch. You remember that? Where the president has the right to declare a national emergency and turn off the internet. That was passed under Obama. We've had that on the books in America longer than Iran has, it looks like. So, I mean, and it looks like the USA is doing everything it can to destabilize Iran. So is Israel. And so, in some areas, they've turned off the internet to try and deal with the situation. Now, the security situation in Iran is very, very, I am impressed at how peaceful and safe Iran is. If you look at Iran, right, on the border of Iran, you've got Afghanistan. There's a country that's been doing really great and real peaceful. And then you got Syria. And then you got Iraq, right? So Iran is surrounded by three countries that have been completely unstable for decades, right? That have been in the middle of wars and all of that. And Iran has had very little terrorism, very little instability. It's a very, very safe country. Now, they have an issue with drug gangs and heroin, and they're dealing with that. And there's been some Sunni separatists along the Afghan border that were trying to break a region away and make it a Sunni country. But other than that, Iran has been very, very safe. And that's one thing when I visited Iran that they emphasized is compared to all the countries surrounding us, we are a safe, stable country. And the level of development is massive. The highways, full electrification, the bridges. I mean, Iran is a very stable country and they take pride in that. And now the United States is trying to destabilize it. And I think, again, does Iran need reform? Of course, right? They need to change a lot of things, their economy. I think, in the 90s, they moved away from a lot of the anti-capitalist goals of the Islamic Revolution. But then with Ahmadinejad, they kind of reinstated them, but they're kind of not sure about where they want to go economically right now. There's a lot of confusion about that. But still, there's no question that Iran doesn't want to go the way of Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan for that matter, right? They don't want to be destabilized in the next Libya, right? And that even a lot of Iranians that hate the Islamic Republic, people in wealthy neighborhoods, they remember what the revolution was like, the instability that came in the revolution, and they don't want to go through that again. So, I don't, the other thing is that the opposition in Iran is not united, right? On the one hand, you've got Shah supporters, people that want to bring back the Shah. That's like wealthy people, wealthy Persians. You've got Arab separatists that want to make the Arabs, want to break the Arab regions away. You got Kurdish separatists that want to break Kurdish things away. There's a weird terrorist group called Mujahideen Khalq, MEK, right? That was like a kind of a messianic Islamo-Marxist group that was originally supported by Saddam Hussein and then started being supported by the neocons, and they can't agree on anything. So the idea that there's just going to be some smooth transition. No, what would happen is Iran would become a mess of sectarian violence and killing, and it wouldn't benefit the people there. And Iran is a strong, prosperous country with a very big economy, a lot of oil, but a lot of other stuff too, a lot of power plants, a lot of steel manufacturing, etc. And they don't need to be destabilized and overthrown, and they're not going to. The Islamic Revolutionary Guards and the Basij Council, they got people in every neighborhood, and they're taking care of business right now. And it's probably pretty brutal. I'm not going to pretend they're being nice right now. I'm sure that they're bringing the hammer down. And that's because 75 police officers have already been killed right at this point. And I mean, that's the last count I heard. It may be even higher now.
Did you know this? Mike Pompeo came out and admitted that the Mossad was involved.
Oh, wow.
Well, he came out and said, oh, yeah, they're out there. And the Mossad is there helping them.
Well,
now, and for those who say, well, why would they shouldn't cut off the internet. I mean, blah, blah, blah. That's terrible. That's oppressive. Let me show you this story from 2009. For those, I recall this very well. This was on Time magazine. Iran protests, Twitter, the medium of the movement. The U.S. State Department doesn't usually take an interest in the maintenance of schedules of .com startups, but over the weekends, officials there reached out to Twitter and asked them to delay a network upgrade that was scheduled for Monday night. The reason, to protect the interest of Iranians using the service to protest the presidential election that took place on June 12th. Twitter moved the upgrade to 2 p.m. Tuesday or 1:30 Tehran time. So the U.S. State Department used one of their online soft power operations, Twitter, deliberately to try to incite protests in Iran. So anybody that says, well, it's brutal, why would Iran turn off the internet? They're turning it off, which might I add, I talked to Larry Johnson and today at 3, and he says, well, just a couple hours ago, I just did something with Nima from Dialogue Works, who's in Iran. He's like, the internet's not off. It's off in particular areas, sure. And I'm sure that they have the technology to figure out where the Mossad and the CIA and everybody else are trying to use these social media accounts to destabilize them. So what are they doing? In the same way, people are like, yeah, well, the Chinese, they're always cutting off Google, and they won't let people have access to American stuff. The Trump administration admitted that they had a CIA program. I'm not going to do it, but I could look that right up now. They admitted that they had a CIA program that was online, trying to utilize online opportunities to destabilize the Chinese. So these countries that are doing this are doing it defensively. If you are being attacked by imperialism, you have to defend yourself.
Indeed. And it's worth also noting that, that article that you read, we got the whole story in 2016 in a follow-up article from the New Yorker that came out, which is that the guy who went to Google on behalf of the State Department was Jared Andrew Cohen. He was the liaison between Google and Silicon Valley and the State Department. And he did it without asking Obama's permission. And Obama tried to fire him for it, and Hillary Clinton stepped in and protected him. And Obama was apparently furious that the State Department was giving orders to Twitter without asking the president. And that's when we talk about deep state and all of that. It's clear that order didn't come from Obama. It came from Jared Andrew Cohen and possibly Hillary Clinton, or possibly somebody else who Hillary Clinton also works for.
Continue. I'm going to hop off for a second. I got to go get a bottled water. I'm dying of thirst. Continue.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, it just kind of reveals that, when you talk about deep state, people are like, what are you talking about? The Illuminati or some shady thing? No, you're talking about a layer of government that doesn't seem to be accountable to elected officials, but manages the affairs of state. I think that's what people are talking about when they refer to the deep state, right? It's interesting. You read, I think Vladimir Lenin talked about the state being the bodies of armed men, the policing agencies, the armed services, the military, the intelligence apparatus. That the state is really the people who do the enforcing, right? The elected officials, at the end of the day, they don't have the power. In theory, they're supposed to direct them, but the state is the people who do the actual enforcing. That's the essence of the state and state power. So when you talk about the deep state, there are people who do the enforcing of U.S. imperialism, and not just on the street, but also online. And that's the power there.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what we're going to do. What's the plan for Sunday? We're going to be there, everyone. Now, look, here's what you need to do. Go into the show notes, and there's a link there. And if you can make it there, it's in Jersey, right outside of New York. If you can make it, click on the link, go sign up, come there. The food's going to be great. We're going to have a great time. You're going to enjoy yourself hanging out and having fun with Caleb and I and lots of other people. Anyway, continue. What's the plan? What are we going to be talking about there, Caleb?
Well, we're going to be talking about opposing war. We're going to be talking about protecting our civil liberties. One big agenda item is the campaign to overturn the Foreign Agents Registration Act, right? That is going to be a big focus, because that's what they used to go after Uhuru. That's what they used to go after our friend Scott Ritter. And they've used that piece of legislation for a long time. And the Uhuru movement has launched a campaign to overturn FARA. And we are going to hear a lot about that. We're going to hear about some other cases with FARA. That's going to be very, very important. We're also, going to hear, there's going to be a long Q&A after dinner, by the way, where people are welcome to get up and say whatever they want. And it's just going to be a long period of engaging. 2 solid hours of just Q&A after dinner, which is going to be very exciting. I'm looking forward to that. There's going to be music. There's going to be, my goodness. We're going to be talking about a lot of different cases and giving out some awards and music and presentations and, updates on Russia and updates on events around the world. We're going to be talking about the Bering Sea Tunnel, right, which is this project that Kirill Dmitriev is very committed to. And it seems like there's some interest in building a tunnel connecting Russia to the United States via Alaska over the Bering Sea, though I will say I watched what's happening now with Trump seizing Russian oil tankers. But again, oil tankers. This is showing that at the end of the day, the problem is the system. And I do want to say one thing, right? Because there's been a lot of people that have come to me over the last few days, and they've said, well, Caleb, you said that Donald Trump was good. You supported Trump. How dare you? This is all your fault. And I said, no, I didn't. What I said was that Donald Trump's campaign had within it promises to end wars. And that the best thing for us to do during the 2024 election cycle was to boost that aspect of Trump's campaign. That was the best thing to do. Kamala Harris promised to continue fighting to the last Ukrainian. She promised to crack down on, quote unquote, disinformation. Trump said he was going to protect free speech. He was going to end the wars. Now, he didn't do that. But wouldn't it have been awful if Kamala Harris had been elected on a platform of continuing all of this and had a popular mandate? Donald Trump was elected on a platform of doing what he clearly isn't doing. And we had the right approach, which was to boost the anti-war sections of Trump's campaign. And honestly, I feel like if more forces had done that, what happened with Maduro and what happened with Iran might not be happening, right? If the Rage Against the War Machine rally that you were a speaker at in 2023, if that coalition had been able to continue, if more of the other anti-war forces had been willing to join with it and not been so hostile to it, that was a coalition that Trump would have had to listen to. Trump has I must say, Trump has absolutely no reason to listen to the Answer Coalition and Brian Becker. He has absolutely no reason to listen to him. They call him a Nazi. They call him a fascist. They're marching around protesting for abortion. They're marching around protesting ICE. Why would Trump listen to them? Yeah, they hate his guts. They call him every nasty name. Why would he listen to them? But Trump, a lot of his supporters are fans of Marjorie Taylor Greene. A lot of his supporters listen to Tucker. A lot of his supporters listen to Candace Owens. And if the strategy of boosting the people within the MAGA camp that were sincere in their anti-war wishes, if that strategy had prevailed, I think we may be in a different situation. But unfortunately, that was not the case. And that's why I do want to urge people, as bad as Trump is being right now, I'm furious. I'm just disgusted. Some of the things he said were just so horrendous, and the shooting and all of that. it's one thing, yes, we have to call out the bad things Trump is doing, but we don't want to retreat into leftism. We don't want to retreat into the mainstream opposition to Trump. I will say I'm a little bit perplexed. So the war powers thing, right, passed in Congress. Now, did you notice that it didn't pass like a couple of weeks ago? So, they could have prevented this before it happened, and they didn't. But now that it happened, and we don't like Trump and the situation in Minneapolis, now that they already went into Venezuela and attacked, now we're going to announce that Trump.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Yeah, the whole thing is very odd. And even Fetterman, who's applauding the kidnapping of Maduro, voted for this. So it seems like now that this has happened, there's some kind of renewed desire to remove Trump or something. This is a very bizarre situation. And I mean, some people are suspecting maybe they'll use this issue in Minneapolis to impeach Donald Trump, which I'm not going to defend Trump in this circumstance after the awful.
The Democrats they'll impeach him for not sending money to Ukraine or something again. I mean, and have you noticed this? The Democrats, I started reading their complaints or their statements, and every one of them was like, "Well, we have questions, and he should have to answer questions. He's already answered all the questions you need." And not one of them. I have not found a statement from a Congress member yet that says he must be released and returned to his country.
Of course not. They're not going to say that. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I wanted to do, Caleb, is show you. A couple of people said, "Well, Garland, do you have any pictures from your trip to Russia?"
Ooh.
Well, guess what? I do. Let's see if I can show you one. This one. Here's an interesting picture. Let me tell you what that is. That bed right there was a bed that Stalin slept in.
Wow.
That was called the Stalin House. We went to this place called Rzhev, where there was a big what do you call it? Battle. And there was this house there, a little old farmhouse that they completely redid. And basically, apparently, it was behind the battle lines, and Stalin came down there to meet with his generals and find out what was going on and help direct the war and things of that nature. And that was the bed that he slept in. And you could go in there and see what happened. It was very interesting. Let's see if I can. Yes, it was very interesting. Let's see if we find. I have another picture. Here's another picture from the Stalin. Oh, here's another one. So this was also what they did. This was in that same room. They had like a glass there, right?
Okay.
And apparently they had actors. And on that glass, a 3D picture showed. And it was Stalin. It was, of course, an actor, and his generals were there meeting with him, advising him of what happened during the battle. So that was the Stalin House. It was really, really neat. That was when I was in Germany. Now, here's a good one. This was a fast food restaurant. That's called Pum. If you understand Cyrillic, it was Pum Chuk. That's the CH. So this was a fast food restaurant, and of course, one of their favorite foods in Russia. This is like it's a little those things. What are they? Palmenia?
Yeah, right.
And it's these are just kind of like a noodle kind of thing, and it has meat inside. And these are boiled and these are fried. So
I always like sour cream with mine. I'll tell you.
Yes, they're
mine. Yeah,
they're really good. Let's see. Oh, guess what this is? This was in Red Square. And this was the traffic directing woman from Scott and I. That's the famous Berlin woman, German woman that was directing traffic.
All right, very good.
They had an actress there in Red Square. It was fantastic. Just going through some pictures there. And for anyone who says, "Oh, what's it like?" This is, and this is not just. This is just a normal night in Moscow. The buildings are beautiful. Now, this is on Red Square. This is an old tank. They had lots of World War II things that you could stand on and take pictures of. But these buildings in Russia, every time you go all over, the buildings are always lit up. Look at that. That's just a normal building on the street in Moscow.
Yeah.
With colors and what have you. They really, in the city of Moscow, do a lot to make sure things look beautiful. Here's a building here. There we go. This is just normal in Moscow. They light their buildings up constantly, and they're just to make the city look beautiful. Here we have Let's see what else we have. Oh, here's something interesting. In Minsk, which people call it, like the last of the Soviet Union, right? In Minsk. So I'm riding down the road in Minsk, in Belarus, and I see this building. But absolutely, Minsk is the most beautiful, cleanest city you've ever seen in your life. People are walking. It's very, the people are very proud. The people are extremely happy in Belarus. I have to say, I've been to a country that people are extremely happy. They're extremely proud. They like their government. They're proud. So they'll say, we're socialists. And they will talk about how what their government does to look out for the people. They're very, very happy. The food is it's just like organic. They're not allowed to have GMOs, no insecticides, none of that crap, none of that. The food's great. But I'm riding down the road and I see this place. I'm like, my God, now you got to see, it's a gigantic building, but it's not just a building. It's a huge complex that goes out from it and way out. This is only a small part of it, right? So I'm like, my God, that is an absolutely beautiful building. What is that? You know what that is? A library.
Wow.
That is a library. That's how important learning and libraries. Those are the kinds of things they do in Belarus that, if it was here, it would be, okay, they have to spend money on something, it has to be something there. That was a library. That's how important it is there for them. This is in Moscow. This is just in Moscow, right? And look there's over the streets, there's a gigantic, like those diamond vision kind of boards that you see in stadiums. They just have there. It's playing advertisements and it's showing different things and patriotic things. Look at that. The streets are beautiful. The streets are clean. Everything's really nice. The infrastructure, look at the infrastructure there. Absolutely beautiful and gorgeous. The city's in good shape. So I'm just saying, for people who, look at some of the rundown crap we got here and they talk about, okay, what's it like over in Russia? And you ever notice this? You come back from Russia and you talk to people like, what'd you do? I just came back from Moscow. And they're like, just, were you afraid? I'm like, afraid? It's the safest place I've ever been in my life. You run around, there's virtually no crime. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't any crime, but there's so little. If you live in America, there's like none. And I'm like, you run around there, the place is beautiful. The people are happy. People are out on the street. Inexpensive to live. And you're just like, it's a great place. I love Moscow. There's nothing wrong with it. And they're like, but the people, are they mean? No, they're not paying you any attention. I've had people say to me, yeah, but you're black. There's hardly no black people in Moscow, are they? I'm like, I didn't really notice I was black because nobody else seemed to. You know what I mean? Nobody was like, hey, there's a black guy. They didn't even notice. And you do fine. And I did notice. As I said, you'll find people, if you look at him, you'd say, well, I guess that guy's Chinese, but he's speaking Russian because he's from a part of Russia that is near that. You'll see people and you're like, well, they kind of look like a Native American person, but then kind of like Oriental or Asian. Oh, that person's from Siberia. There's people who are all different shades and they're all Russian because Russian has all different kinds of people, not just the Slavic people that you're used to on the border. So the fact of the matter is this: they don't really notice that you're black, white, green, gray, or grizzly because there's Russians that look every which way. They're just doing their thing.
Yeah. Well, one of the perks of coming to the event is we have this new booklet about Ibrahim Traore, and that's going to be in the packet that everyone gets, because Russia's ties to Africa, there are massive numbers of Africans living in Russia. And Russia's relationship with many African countries is very, very deep. In terms of, Russia has a lot of state-run, mineral companies that have joint ventures with state-run mineral companies on the African continent, and the Union of Sahel states in particular, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Those countries are aligned with Russia, and Russia is defeating the terrorists and, in alliance with those governments, and they are building and building and building. And, one of the people who will be speaking at the event is my friend Penny, who wrote this book about Ibrahim Traore. And, we have updated it. She has an article, 3 years of sovereignty, just going over everything that Ibrahim Traore has done in terms of expanding education, expanding farming, expanding everything in the country. I mean, it's just massive. In just 3 years, Ibrahim Traore has just overseen the explosion of economic growth in this African country. It's just kind of utterly amazing. And that's part of this new economy that's rising in the world, along with the Belt and Road coming out of China, along with many different, I mean, you could talk about the axis of resistance in the Middle East, the Bolivarian alternative of Latin America. There is a whole new economy in this world, and America's getting left behind because we're not part of it. And it seems like we want to go down with the Western system. I will say it's a little bit interesting to see that it seems like Keir Starmer is not fully on board with Trump kidnapping Maduro, which is very interesting. Did you notice that? That was
yeah.
Yeah, what's going on with that?
The British, because the British are smarter than that. I mean, they do those kind of evil things, but they're like, come on, man, you got to be like us. We're slick. We would just like poison him when nobody's looking. So they're like, you guys are knuckle draggers. We're much more sophisticated in our evil doing. And I think that's the history of the British Empire, perfidious albeit. Now, let me show you another thing. Two things you're going to need to know. This is about my trip to Russia. Let's start here. In case you didn't know how bad it was, Putin's desperate troops so short of food, they're eating each other in Ukraine. My God. Look, Ukraine claims the Russian forces have resorted to cannibalism. Those poor Russians, they're starving to the point where they're literally eating each other. Well, that sounds like, sounds pretty rough. So let me show you how bad it was. There you go. That's how hungry I was. That you notice it? Look around there. Boy, oh boy, you got lamb. This whole platter. This is one long kebab, the meat kebab that goes all the way around the platter. You got lamb, you got chicken. This is a restaurant. And trust me when I tell you this, the restaurants are very, very affordable. So I don't know about the troops starving and eat each other, but trust me, the restaurants, all they got to do is go to a restaurant in Moscow. So seeing that the restaurants are full, the food is very reasonable, and it is delicious, and there's plenty of it. Everywhere you go in the like there was my hotel, and right up the corner from me there was a little 24 hour like a 7-Eleven kind of store. But there was all kind of food. You could go in there anytime, and I looked around, and there was things that you could get to eat. And the hotel that I was at had a 24-hour restaurant. So I'm just saying, I find it hard to believe with the abundance of food that I saw. We went in grocery stores. The shelves are all packed with food, and the prices are extremely reasonable. I find it hard to believe that the troops are out on the front line are eating each other.
Well, the big story in Russia for the past 2 or 3 years, and I guess the past decade, has been the farming boom, right?
Yes.
Putin has created a whole layer of farmers because that was, some of the first sanctions that got put on Russia after the Ukraine crisis in 2014 were on agricultural products. So Russia went ahead, and the Russian government started subsidizing and giving people money to launch their own farms. And now they're having the biggest harvests there they've ever had. They've got a whole new, cattle area. Beef used to be something the Russians were not too big on, but now they've got beef over there like you wouldn't believe. There's a huge expansion of their food production because they can't get it from the United States, or they can't get it from Western Europe like they once did. And it's that whole thing about, sometimes, for a kid to learn to swim, he just has to get in the water, and when it comes to Russia, the USA cuts them off and isolates them. And now we see their economy get stronger domestically. I mean, when I was in Nizhny Novgorod, the city, that's one thing that there were all these new hotels and new bars and new restaurants that opened up because they'd all been American companies, bars and restaurants and all of that. And then when the special military operation happened, the American hotels closed down, the American bars closed down. And so the Russians, in order to keep the economy going, they had to start their own. And now it's much better. And, I was sitting in restaurants filled with stacks full of food like that, and it was Russian owned because the American companies had pulled out, and they bragged about, like, this is what happened, right? The special military operation, America cut us off. So we just had to build our own. And that's the way you got to do it, right? And that, these sanctions, if anything, they're just kind of giving Russia an opportunity to learn what it's capable of doing, and what the imperialists never wanted them to be able to do for themselves, right? After the fall of the Soviet Union, Naomi Klein's book, The Shock Doctrine, has statistics about the fall of the Soviet Union. The farms in Russia went bankrupt. the collective farms, they shut down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something like 80,000 factories closed their doors. American companies would go to Russia and there'd be a steel factory, and all the workers there, when they privatized it, they'd all get a share and they'd be starving. They'd have no work. And so then the American company would buy everybody's share for a tiny amount, and then they would just close the factory down so that Russia had to import their steel from American companies. I mean, the fall of the Soviet Union was about just destroying Russia economically, getting rid of their farming sector, getting rid of their manufacturing and all of that. And Putin started rebuilding it by putting oil and gas under public ownership, and he's continued doing it. And then they cut Russia out of importing American and European agricultural products, so he rebuilt their farming sector. And it seems like every time they cut Russia off from another section of the U.S. economy, Putin says, "Okay, we'll just build our own." And they build it bigger and better at this point. I mean, it's kind of amazing. You know, and again, they seem to have it in their heads that this is the 1990s. In the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, if America wanted to just really stick it to a country, they could. Iraq, you know, I used to work for Ramsey Clark, who was the U.S. Attorney General, and he defied the sanctions very heroically because the USA put sanctions on Iraq and said, Iraq, you can't have chlorine to clean your water because maybe that could be a chemical weapon. And so Iraq couldn't purify its water. It was hit with all kinds of sanctions. And half a million children died from preventable diseases. That's what the USA did. So Ramsey Clark, who I used to work for very heroically, he went to the airport with big stacks of medicine and said, I am breaking the law. Please prosecute me. I am going to Iraq with this plane full of medicine. I want you to put me in jail for it. And they didn't, right? They froze his bank accounts for a little bit and they didn't prosecute him because they didn't want to draw attention to it, you know. But that's what they did to Iraq. Cuba was very, very hard hit in the 90s. You know, in North Korea, they created the food crisis in North Korea. They couldn't get oil because of the petrodollar, you know, so North Korea couldn't import oil. And that's when they had what they call the arduous march of the food crisis in North Korea. That was the 90s, right? When the Soviet Union was gone, the USA, the end of history, the USA had total dominance. And so, yeah, if the USA didn't like a country, we decide not to trade with you. We put a sanction on you. You're done. That's not the way it is anymore. Look at Russia. Russia's the most sanctioned country in the world. All that wealth that you're showing, that is in the most sanctioned country in the world, right? And in the most sanctioned country in the world, they're saying, okay, America won't trade with us. We'll trade with somebody else.
Well, let me show you something else. You know what this is? I took a train from Moscow to St. Petersburg. I had no idea and somebody came around and they handed everyone this. And I'm like, what is this? Well, if you look, it's a menu. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I chose the salmon tartare, the cod with string beans, right? You get two things here. And then you can pick one of the two desserts of your choice. So you can pick this, and they have something. Now, this is grilled salad with feta cheese, pork medallions. This is grilled various things. And if you say I'm a vegetarian, then they'll just put a couple things together, and then you get. Now, this is just a train. I just got a train. It's a 4-hour train ride. I had no thought that along with my train ticket came this gourmet meal. They come around, and first they got this big tray with hot towels, and they hand everybody a hot towel with this grabber, and you wipe your hands with it and you give them back to it. Then they come along and they give you the menu and you look at that, and they're pushing a cart just like you're on an airplane in a beautiful new high-tech train. They serve you your food. They come back. I'm like, for God's sake, would you like coffee or tea? This is all on a train. You don't get that on a train here. I mean, you got to buy it yourself on a train here. This came with a ticket, and might I add, the price of the ticket was very, very reasonable. So, I mean, I'm like, they tell you, oh, what a hellhole. Oh, you're going to Russia. You're screwed. And you go there and you're like, man, they got it pretty good here. If that's a sanctioned country, don't get rid of the sanctions. If I'm there, keep the sanctions on. This is pretty nice.
Yeah, and it's subsidized, right? Public transportation and food are heavily subsidized. So it's very affordable, right? The price of food is very low. The Russian taxes are very low also. They have a flat tax, which is something a lot of conservatives really like. I think it's like 12%.
Well, okay. It's somewhere between, I think, depending on a couple of things, it can be 7% or 9 to 14%.
Right, which is...
Most people pay 12. But if you own a business, it's 4 to 6%.
Wow. Wow.
If you have your own business, it's very low. Additionally, now there's a, just like us, there's a tax on sales tax on
Yeah,
everything,
yeah.
right? But just like us, but 4 to 6% as opposed to 28% or 30-some%. That's one of the things. Another thing is we went to this guy's house. Everybody in their community is switching to gas. Their whole community, and I'm like, he's like, oh yeah, everybody's switching to gas. And now let's start here. Electricity is extremely cheap because of, as you know, it's all your energies and things like that are subsidized. I'm like, oh well, why not get the energy? Why not stay with the electricity? From everybody tells me how cheap electricity is. He says gas is now 1/5. He says it's 1/5 the cost of electricity. Everybody's switching it. And I'm like, well, if electricity is cheap, I'll tell you how good it was when we walked into their house. And you know, when you walk in, of course, it's cold there. And you know, you have a little, when you first walk in at the front of anybody's house, there's where you take your shoes off. That floor is heated. And all the homes you go in, the floor is heated because it's cold there. You take your shoes off to walk around the house. You stand on the floor. I'm like, wow, this floor is heated. They said, oh yeah, that's normal. Because electricity is so cheap. One guy was telling us, he said he went to France, and you know, energy is so expensive. He said we were there, and the people we were staying with, like, you turn on the hot water, like, no, turn off the hot water. You know, you turn that down, you know, because it's so expensive. And he's like, he couldn't believe it. I mean, you're there, the heat's black, you know, they turn the heat up whatever they want, run hot water like there's no tomorrow. Energy is extremely cheap there. And so they don't even think of hot water or whatever, heating the floors. Who cares? It's so cheap. So they're living really good. Screw Europe. These people are living way better than Europe.
No, this is, you know, I thought it would get better because this was what Biden was doing and this is what Trump is doing. And that, you know, we want to be specific here. A lot of people, and I think even Trump, when he was speaking, he said we're invading them to get their oil. It's not that, because I remember when the USA invaded Iraq, the gas prices went up immediately afterwards to the highest they had ever been in history. And I had a lot of people, my friends in high school, said, well, I thought you said we were invading Iraq to get their oil, and now the gas is so damn expensive. Well, what it was that Iraq was a major oil exporting country that got blown to shreds, right? And that's the thing. Venezuela is a major oil exporting country, and the USA is preventing them from exporting oil, right? It is freezing their ability to export oil, which is making the price of oil go very high. And it's also trying to kind of twist the arm of China to make China buy oil from America rather than Venezuela. And that's a really big part of this too, is China buys oil from Venezuela and from Iran and from Russia and from America and from other countries. China is kind of an equal opportunity oil buyer. They'll buy oil from anybody because China needs oil. China is the manufacturing hub of the world. They make half the world's steel, a big percentage of the world's copper, the biggest telecommunications in the world, and they need oil. They don't have enough oil domestically to you know, keep going, so they need oil. And that's why the South China Sea and Taiwan and all of that is so important, is because the oil tankers go to Shanghai. They go to the ports in Shanghai near the South China Sea. So China has to make sure that the USA is not ever able to cut off their oil supply. And that's why, I mean, that there's all this tension about China building up in the South China Sea. They want to make sure that America doesn't have an oil veto over their economy. They don't want the USA to be able to say, well, we're mad at you, China, we're going to cut off your oil, right? So that's the issue. And so this is, the Venezuela stuff in a lot of ways is an attack on China, because they want China to have to buy oil from America, to be reliant on America. And it's pretty wild what they're doing. But energy scarcity, right? That has been the strategy of the Rockefellers since the beginning, right? They've been talking about that. You read The Limits to Growth and the Club of Rome. You read some of the stuff they were publishing even back in like the 1920s. They were saying, we need to create energy scarcity so that our competitors go out of business, so the price of oil gets higher and we make loads and loads of money and we secure our monopoly. Energy scarcity has been the strategy of the ultra-rich for so long. And that was, Jimmy Carter was all about that. I mean, you know, and the OPEC boycott and provoking, you know, anger in the Middle East and all of that. And it was energy scarcity. And a lot of the Reagan Revolution was kind of the rest of the rich and powerful in America saying to the Rockefellers, we don't want energy scarcity anymore. You're bankrupting the country, because it was under Carter. We had the high oil prices. You had the energy crisis, and then that's when Paul Volcker was put in charge of the Federal Reserve, and they deregulated the lending of money. It used to be states had usury laws. Every state in America, a lot of states had laws. You can't lend money over a certain amount. Well, Paul Volcker was put in charge of the Federal Reserve, and Congress nullified all of that. And the economy was screaming under Jimmy Carter, and Ronald Reagan represented a layer of like the military industrial complex that just didn't want that anymore and said, morning in America, whatever. And they came in and they kind of put that on hold and they rebooted military spending, et cetera. Ronald Reagan was not a great president in my view, but he was largely a reaction to some of the policies of the Trilateral Commission and some of the ultra rich, right? And I talk about this. I'm really fascinated by the concept of divisions within the ruling class, and we're seeing that now. But what seems to be the case is that Biden's policies are being continued by Trump. Trump is also driving energy scarcity. That was clear what Biden was doing with the Russia, with everything. I mean, he was trying with blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. Energy scarcity was what Biden was all about. Trump is doing the same thing. He's doing the exact same thing. What's interesting is that the clear difference, I will say, is that Biden's strategy seemed to be following Brzezinski a little bit more, which was Biden was a little bit friendlier to Iran, a little bit friendlier to Venezuela, a little bit friendlier to the smaller countries, and he wanted to put the heat on Russia and China. Right? These are the big countries who want to isolate them. And that was Brzezinski's strategy during the Cold War. They called them the satellite countries. Let's recruit, whereas it seems like Donald Trump is thinking short term. He's like, I want to just get a payout. Iran's got oil. Let's make Iran scream. Venezuela's got oil. Let's make them scream. Nigeria's got some oil. We'll start fighting for Christians or whatever in Nigeria. And Trump is thinking a little more short term and shaking up some of these weaker countries. Whereas Biden seemed to be playing a longer game of like, how can we isolate Russia and China? So that's a difference that you could say was going on. Perhaps that's something we can look into a little bit. But we talk about divisions in the ruling class.
So also, I don't know if people know, it's been apparently there are reports that there was an Oreshnik strike in Lvov. The Russians apparently they had been saying they were going to pay somebody back one way or the other. I would suspect in Lvov it's usually some kind of a NATO thing. That let's take a look. There are some pictures of this Oreshnik strike. Let's take a look at that from a distance. Let's take a look. Wait a minute. You can see in the distance. So you can see, for those of you who don't know, the Oreshnik is a missile that carries 6 pods of missiles. It flies at hypersonic speeds, and it carries 6 pods of missiles. Each of those missiles carries 6, so it fires a total of 36 missiles, which are also all hypersonic. And that's why you can see those streaks of light, a bunch of streaks of light coming down at the same time. And then, of course, you hear the explosion. It has an incredible amount of power. And so apparently if it was in Lvov, I'm guessing because that's near the Polish border, that's where NATO usually has a lot of things. They've got bunkers and things like that. So I would imagine the Russians, who were kind of angry over ships and attacks on Putin, some NATO facility probably is not there, and it can go extremely deep. It can be loaded with explosive charges, but they also use these interesting metal charges that heat up like 4,000 degrees or something like that when they strike, and just turn everything into like it's atoms. I mean, it's really an incredible. It is not a nuclear missile. It is below nuclear, but it's like approaching that kind of power as a conventional weapon. So apparently the Russians decided it was payback time for something, and whatever it was in Lvov that got hit, it ain't there anymore.
Well, I'm not a weapons expert. Scott Ritter is a weapons expert. He knows this stuff like the back of his hand. I mean, he's brilliant with all of this. That's his field, is arms control. But, it's interesting because, they talk about during the Cold War, it was not really a nuclear arms race. It was like a nuclear arms catch up. The USA would invent a new nuke, and then Russia would have to make their own version of it. But in now, it seems like Russia's ahead. Right. I mean, the USA has been the world's arms and weapons dealer since the 50s, at least. Right. The whole world buys their weapons from America, from Raytheon and General Electric and all the companies, the American weapons manufacturers. But it seems like now, right, those S-400s that Russia has, right? India's buying them, Turkey's buying them. Everyone wants to get their hands on those S-400 missiles, right? They're quite popular. And it seems like Russia is, what used to be kind of America's, big thing was everyone bought their weapons from us. I mean, this Oroshenko, I've been hearing a lot about it, right? And it looks like it finally got used, which I mean, as somebody who doesn't like war and as somebody who sympathizes with all victims of war, I'm not going to be happy that this missile was used, but it shows that again, the USA operates on this assumption that we're always going to be able to have dominance and no one's ever going to be able to challenge us. It's like, yes, they are. Yes, they are. I mean, so yeah. Yeah, I mean, I look at that.
And this apparently this was at night and it was off in the distance. Apparently, this is what the Oreshnik strike looked like. It lit up the night. Whatever it was that got hit off in the distance, that it's done. That's one hell of a hit there. And that's, again, we're not doing weapons porn or war porn or anything like that, but that's reality. And I think as journalists, we should, report what's going on.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it seemed like things were heading toward peace, and then all of a sudden Maduro is kidnapped and Russian oil tankers are being stopped, and so now things are escalating. I mean, and we're gonna have to see what comes next at this point. I mean, all these things are connected. There was a plot to kill Ibrahim Traore. There was an attempt on Ibrahim Traore's life recently. There was an attempt. There's the situation in Iran, and that you have to wonder if Trump is maybe, I'm just throwing this out there, maybe this is just wishful thinking. Maybe they're on the brink of realizing they have to end this Ukraine war. And Trump went to the neocons and said, all right, this is your chance. Do everything you possibly can before we put the ink in writing and we just end it. So this is your chance, Marco Rubio, whatever you want to do. Kidnap Maduro, stir up riots in Iran, try to kill Ibrahim Traore. This is like, get it all out of your system right now, because pretty soon I'm going to be signing a peace treaty. I hope that's what's happening. But, I mean, I can only hope. I mean, at this point, I'm not happy. I'm really, really not happy with a lot of what I've seen. I've been to Iran many times, and I've seen that the revolution has a real base. I actually have been in the presence of the supreme leader. That's one of I'm very few Americans have had the ability to be in the presence of Iran's supreme leader. And I attended a rally at the mausoleum of Khomeini, and the supreme leader Khamenei spoke before 20,000 people. And I was in an auditorium with 20,000 Iranians, the most dedicated hardliners in that auditorium. And I was there, and I was in the back of the room with a lot of Chinese and African diplomats. We all had chairs we were supplied and earpieces for the translation. But you looked in that room, it was a lot of teenagers in military uniforms. It was a lot of very working class people who looked to the supreme leader in the Islamic Revolution as the person who brought them running water, the person who brought them electricity, the reason they all have telephones in their homes, and they are ready to die for that revolution. When the supreme leader walks into the room, they actually all extend their hands like this, and they say, "The blood in my vessels belongs to the supreme leader. The blood in my vessels belongs to the supreme leader." That's what they chant. And just him walking in the room, they start crying when he walks into the room. It's like this kind of religious devotion. He's not the president. He's more like the Pope, right? He's like the religious leader. He doesn't set policy necessarily. He sets like certain red lines that can't be crossed. He lets the elected government govern, but then he sets certain principles. He's supposed to, have religious guidance, right? For example, like in Iran, there's a lot of political parties, but the two major camps, you have the hardliners, the principalists, and the reformists or the moderates, right? And the supreme leader says that a true Muslim is both a hardliner and a moderate, right? And that you have to stick to your principles, but you also have to be willing to change. And that so he's not a hardliner or a moderate. He says that a good Muslim is both of those things, right? So he's not taking sides necessarily. He allowed the Iran nuclear negotiations to go on. That's when I was there in 2015. And he spoke specifically about that. And he said, I'm allowing these negotiations to go on. He said, but Iran and America are never going to be, allied countries. That's one thing he said, And then at the time I was there was a big controversy because some of the people that were supporting the Iran nuclear deal came out and said, well, actually, Khomeini, the founder of Iran, said we should never call America the Great Satan. Right. And Khamenei, the supreme leader, had been silent about that. And he came out and he said, now there's some people that are saying, that we were never supposed to call America the Great Satan. He said, well, He said, we don't mean the American people. We do not mean the American people. We mean the American system, right? But the American system that backs Israel and all its crimes, that has invaded so many countries and killed many people, that is the great Satan. That is the great Satan. I believe it or not, if I remember correctly, he talked about Waco. You remember Waco? He talked about Waco. I was in the audience as an American. I'm the only American in this room at 23,000 Americans. And he's saying, the American government murdered the children of Waco, Texas, right? Who, were peaceful in their compound there and burned them alive. That's the federal police of America and their crimes. How is that any different than what ISIS does? It was quite a powerful speech. In his speech, he emphasized, he said there were two distortions of Islam. On the one hand, he said there was westernized Islam, people who were embracing the Western system. On the other hand, there was ISIS, right? Wahhabist extremist, ideology that, it has Muslims murdering people and carrying out acts of terrorism. He said, we're neither terrorists and extremist Wahhabis or westernized. We carry on the tradition of the imams, right? And that's what he was kind of getting at as a Shia. And in his speech, it was quite a powerful moment. I will never forget being in the auditorium there with 20,000 Iranians hearing the supreme leader speak. It was a very life-changing experience. But, they have these things called the Basij councils in Iran. Basij means the mobilized oppressed, right? And in every neighborhood they have them, and they enforce the goals of the revolution on a local level. Those they're not. I mean, a third of the country is owned by this military group. They have the army, and then they have something called the Islamic Revolutionary Guards. They legally own a third of the country. A third of the country is owned by this military organization that is above the elected government, accountable only to the supreme leader. So if the USA thinks that they're going to, fight a war against Iran, they have no idea what they're talking about. They have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, it's not going to happen, right? The USA can destabilize Iran. And there are a lot of wealthy people in Iran, especially like rich kids in Iran who were not born before the revolution and don't know what it's like, and watch a lot of American media. And they say the thing about the internet, right? So the internet in Iran is heavily censored, but everyone's got a VPN, right?
Sure.
Even the very religious conservative people I would meet in Iran said, well, I have a VPN so I can see what the other people are looking at when we're arguing, so it's like, so everybody, I mean, they can see the same stuff we can see. Right. And there's a lot of like wealthy kids in Tehran who, they buy the Western American media, but the people in the countryside, the impoverished people, they're ready to fight for it. And, they're not going to be able to overthrow the Islamic Republic. It's not going to happen. The Islamic Republic has a lot of support, and they are going to remain intact.
Well, the report is preliminarily, Oreshchnik hit the Bilch-Volitsky-Uhersky underground gas storage facility in Lvov, which has a design capacity of 17.05 billion cubic meters, which is 50% of the total capacity of all storage facilities in Ukraine.
Well,
so, maybe they need to make a deal. This is not good at any rate. So, but thanks a lot. Well, that's just about an hour. And certainly appreciate it. I'm looking forward. Everyone, if you are in the New Jersey area, or you may be in the New Jersey area, go to on Sunday, go to the show notes, and there's a link there, and you can click on that link, and you can register, and you can come hang out with Caleb and I. Any final words, Caleb?
No, I'll see you all in New Jersey. Should be fun. And, these are hard times, and that's why community is so important. We got to build a community, right? If we just stay isolated on our computers, feeling pessimistic, right? We got to build a community of people who understand what's going on and build up a strategy for how we can get our country out of this mess. So, community, solidarity. See you on Sunday.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Remember, thank you for all my Patreon people, the people that do buy me a coffee, the people that do everything they can to help keep the channel going. You see my PO box there for people who like to do snail mail. Thank you very much. The most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. I'm out.